For part 2 of our note naming activity today, we're going to talk about accidentals. We're only going to talk about 2 of the 5 accidentals today. An accidental changes the pitch of a note with a symbol. A sharp raises a note by a half step, and it looks like this. Kind of looks like a hashtag or a number sign. The way I like to remember this is that it looks pointy and sharp. The other one we're going to talk about today is a flat. A flat is the opposite. It lowers a note by a half step. And it kind of looks like a B with a flattened bottom. When notes have accidentals on the staff, they look a certain kind of way. Here we have a note that we know is F because it's on the first space of the treble clef. If you look at the keyboard, I've highlighted the F for us. And if I put a sharp in front of this note, it becomes an F sharp. All right, so it was an F, and now if I add a sharp to it, it becomes an F sharp. And if I look over on the keyboard, it's also been raised by a half step. So it used to be here when it was on F, and now it's an F sharp. It's moved up a half step. This note we know to be G because it's on the second line of the treble clef. And that's where it is on the keyboard. If I were to add a sharp in front of this note, it would become G sharp. Again, if I look at the keyboard, it raises the note by a half step. It moves from a white key to a black key, from a natural note to a note with an accidental. If I put this note here on the third space, I know that note to be C on the treble clef. This is where it appears on the keyboard. If I were to put a sharp in front of this note, it would become C sharp, and it would raise that note by a half step. If you look at the keyboard, it's highlighted for you. And finally, if I were to put this note on the staff, this note would be recognized as E on the treble clef because it's on the fourth space. This is where E is on the keyboard. If I were to put a sharp in front of my E, it would become E sharp, and it would get raised by a half step on the keyboard. This one is unique because it goes from white key to white key, but is still being raised by a half step. Even though this note is F, it is also called E sharp. All right, let's talk a little bit about flats. If I had a note on this line on the staff, it would be E. And if I put a flat in front of it, it would become E flat. Remember what we said about flats. They go down by half step. The note gets lowered by half step. So if my note was on an E, and I lowered and I added a flat in front of it, I would lower it by a half step. If I was dealing with this note on the second space of the staff, it would be A. There it is on the keyboard. And if I put a flat in front of it, again, I would lower the note by a half step. Take a look at the keyboard. So I'm on A and I'm moving down to A flat. If I were to have a note here on the third line, it would be B. And if I were to put a flat in front of this note, it would become B flat, which would lower B by a half step. And finally, if I had a note here on the fourth space, we know that note to be E on the treble clef. Here it is on the keyboard. If I were to put a flat in front of this note, it would become E flat, and it would get lowered as well by a half step on the keyboard. So again, a flat lowers a note by a half step, while a sharp raises a note by a half step. When identifying sharps and flats on the keyboard, remember that the symbol on the note must match the symbol in the name of the note. So if we have a flat here, this is not a B, it is a B flat. Because as we saw on the keyboard, they are in completely different places. So be careful when answering the questions for the next assignment in Google Classroom.